I'm Stefan Formentano, a member of Magic City LEGO Users Group here in Birmingham, and this is my Cyberpunk Mega City. So myself and one other member of Magic City LEGO Users Group built this collaboratively, and it's just supposed to be sort of a cyberpunk, neo-Tokyo, futuristic city.
So is that kind of how you would define cyberpunk for people who maybe aren't familiar with this genre? What are kind of the main elements you go for in a build like this?
Man, cyberpunk is a science fiction genre is really wide. It's specific and non-specific at the same time. So cyberpunk is really hard to define. But the inspirations for this specifically were from pop culture, would be the Blade Runner films, the Netflix show Altered Carbon would be another good one if you were interested in that. I think there's a book that's a really popular cyberpunk that's called Neuromancer. I'm meaning to read it. After I built this, I've sort of become a cyberpunk fan, as you can tell. But yeah, Google cyberpunk and you're going to find a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff.
A lot of different source material, but that's awesome. So take us through the build here then. Where did you start with this whole layout?
Sure. So this layout you might recognize. I think you actually did a video on your channel. The Brolug did a very nice cyber-apocalyptic city that was much larger than this, but we took some inspiration from them. They designed a modular cube system to pull off theirs, and I took some pictures from the internet. They never actually detailed exactly how they did it, but I was able to deconstruct it from pics I found online, and we designed the modular cube system. You can tell each of the 5 sections on the bottoms are individual cubes that, when we get it to the show, will pin together with Technic pins. So we started with designing the cube, and that worked out how that would fit, and then so we sort of built, I would guess, from the middle down and then up is how we did it. So this separates into about 30 modules, so it makes it easier to transport back and forth from the show. So,
and with a build like this, you've got a lot of angles, kind of the roads coming out here and everything. So was there any kind of planning on paper or that sort of thing, or did you just sit down with the bricks and go at it?
After I designed the cube, or reverse engineered the cube, I drew a simple layout that I wanted to achieve. If you look at cities like Tokyo or Hong Kong, or which I consider very cyberpunky in feel, they have a lot of angles in them. They're a little bit more organically built than cities you see in the United States, for example. So it was important to me that I capture some of that angled feel. And I also just think, in general, LEGO builds that can achieve an angle, it really sets it apart, because you don't generally think of LEGO as having a lot of angles. You think of it as very, lots of right angles. So it was just important to me to achieve that angle, just to set it apart, I guess, and because it molds well into sort of the genre that it is. It's sort of like a mangled mess of buildings, and the angles achieve that really well, I think.
Now, is there any kind of general storyline going on here with what the minifigs represent?
Well, you can see that there is a security force in the city. So we started building the layout in August, so we didn't have a whole lot of time, and we got the city together. So I designed the security force and set it up as if they've shut down the city streets, just so I didn't have to build any cars. So you can see the security details sort of around the city, guarding the citizens and sort of making sure this city, the citizens are obeying the laws. Not that there's a whole lot of laws in a cyberpunk metropolis, but they're doing their best.
Yeah, that makes sense. Take us through then. It looks like there's kind of 3 main building sections here, and kind of the structure of each of those and what you were going for there.
Sure. The other gentleman who contributed to this build, Peter Bradbury, also part of Magic City LEGO Users Group, built this building here. And as you can see, the side here is an aquarium built into the side of the building. And he also was able to get these green panels to get that two-tone effect into the building, which is awesome. That's something I would kind of urge anybody who's interested or sees this and likes it to try their hand at some cyberpunk building, because you really get to use parts in your collection that you normally don't get to use. So I build a lot of historical stuff, so branching into this sort of sci-fi genre was really awesome because I really got to kind of dump my pieces out and build sort of like I was when I was a kid. Like, that's a neat piece and I want to incorporate it, and it really fits well. So Peter built this, the aquarium building.
I like the use. Is that the roller coaster tracks
Yeah,
there?
it's the roller coaster tracks, and then I think it was a racer's track piece that's laid behind that, and they sort of have this nice angle that goes together well. So he did a really great job on that. The next building here is one I designed. It's just sort of supposed to be a generic, cyberpunk feeling building. I was happy to be able to incorporate the Deathstar Ball piece that came out a few years ago to capture that sort of sci-fi feel. And I found that a lot of buildings in like Tokyo have this nice gentle curve to them. So the building on the side here with the lit billboard, I really wanted to achieve that curve, and I think that pulled off really well. Something that the Brolug did really well was incorporating the EL wire into their builds to give it a nice lighted effect. And you can see that in a few of the builds we have inlaid the EL wire to brighten it up a bit. And the last building here on top is a smaller cyberpunk version of a real building in downtown Tokyo called Nakagin Tower. So it's like a pod apartment building, and it's been featured in some films that are like a cyberpunk sort of feel. And I thought I really, really wanted to bring that to my build. So that actually probably took half of the time to build from the whole thing, was to achieve the look of Nakagin Tower. I'm pretty happy with that.
How are those pods all attached on there? Because it looks like it could be a little difficult.
I can actually pull one off. So the idea about behind the real building is that if you ever wanted to move, you just unbolt your pod apartment, load it on a truck, and move it to another city. Now, unfortunately, they only ever built one of these, so it was a great idea on paper. So yeah, I designed it so that it would have 4 studs it would connect to and a doorway for each apartment. I don't know why I put that detail in there, but it was important to me to make it as real as possible, and it makes it more fun, if you can put those cool details in there. So that's how they connect.
Right, and it seems to keep them attached on pretty strong. They aren't falling off at the show.
They all made it. When I transport it, I take them off because they aren't on great, but I surprised myself with how well the 4 studs hold the little apartments on. So it worked out nicely.
So then if we move down to the bottom layer here, you've got kind of different approach to some of the structures on this part of the build.
Yeah, so one thing that Cyberpunk has generally is a sort of gritty, run-down feeling, and to sort of set ours apart, I kind of wanted ours to be a bit brighter. So when we discussed in the club how we wanted it to feel, we really wanted to have a lot of trees and plants and maybe a little bit of a brighter feel. So ours is maybe more of a a more successful cyberpunk city than you would generally find in the genre. So we've included a lot of plant life and trees built around in the city. We've had a lot of people this weekend say that it's very reminiscent of the Ninjago City Lego set, and we take that as a compliment because that's sort of what we were going for, sort of a brighter feeling to the cyberpunk genre. So, and you can notice that a lot throughout the buildings on the bottom, especially, that we've tried to incorporate a lot of organic things in the build.
Love this is this like a cafe here? You got like the trans neon green sort of pieces there?
Yeah, so I built in a little noodle bar. That's another sort of takeaway from like Tokyo or Hong Kong. Street food is like a really big part of life. There's also a very famous scene in the Blade Runner film where he sits in a noodle bar and eats on the side of the road. So I wanted to incorporate a noodle bar into the build for sure. So that's exactly what that is, sort of a street food vendor built into the building right there.
And so you've got lights in there. You mentioned some of the lights that you incorporated in some of the buildings here. So those just look really fantastic. There's even a world of lights when they shut off all the lights in the building here, and they were all on last night. It looked amazing.
Yeah, no, we were super happy with how all the lighting turned out. I've actually never incorporated lights into my structure, and Peter, who also helped, I don't believe he had done much work with lights either, but it was something that the Inspiration build, the Brolug build, did really, really well. So I sat down and did a lot of research online for really unique LED components, and I learned to solder building this, and the EL wire a little little kits you can buy from various sellers online. But all of the other little LED things you see, we actually built custom around the Lego to achieve that lighted effect. So, and like I said, we were super happy with how it turned out. And I would encourage anybody who wants to light up their mocks just to do some research. It's very easy to incorporate lights, and I think it really elevates a build if you can do some lights. So, like I said, pleasantly surprised with how the lighting turned out.
No, you're exactly right. I always say that lights and movement are the two things that really kind of make a build stand out. And, especially when you're at a convention full of tons of great builds, when you add those little things on top, it helps a lot.
Yeah, and, you want to be eye-catching, especially when you're at a big event surrounded by, folks who can really build some nice stuff. So I think that the lighting sort of gives you an extra edge to get noticed, and people appreciate the work that goes into it. Because, it's not easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. But I think the effect that it gives is totally worth all the work that you put into it.
I also want to mention then kind of the bottom layer is all water here, so you've got it tiled, and then you've got this ship over here. Is that a Chima boat hull?
I believe so, yeah. It came from the Chima line. Like I said about the cars, we didn't really want to build the cars, so we shut the streets down. And yesterday we saw that the water was also looking kind of empty, so we threw a little boat together to have another detail there. Yeah, and that also, you pointed out that the Chima boat hull, the Cyberpunk, build some Cyberpunk, anybody who's interested, because you really, really get to dig deep into your parts collection and use stuff you generally wouldn't see. So awesome little detail there.
Yeah, some of these parts here are things that would be really difficult to incorporate into, like you were saying, the historical builds or some of these other genres.
Yes, yeah, lots of cool colors, and Lego has done really well in recent years to expand their color part selections to really interesting stuff, like the teal colors you see and the salmon colors there, and so it's like a really great time to build Cyberpunk stuff, because you're getting all the AFOLs are getting their hands on some cool colors these days, so it lined up perfect for us.
Now, you mentioned the kind of security detail minifigures, but there's lots of other great design minifigures you have in here, so maybe point out some of your favorites and some of the elements there.
Sure. Another, I'm going to keep saying it, but Cyberpunk is a genre you really get to dig deep into your minifig collection too. So we thought it was important to have the city sort of populated as much as we can. So we have the geisha that you can see from the collectible minifigure line, and we did a couple part swaps with the head to make her look a little more sinister, since that's a feel in a lot of Cyberpunk stuff. I particularly like this one. This little afro came out of the Lego Movie 2 line, was this giant afro, and we have, I don't know, I guess who is it, Gamora from this superhero line. So it's just a lot of the figs are just like a mix match of tons and tons of themes. You'll see some space figs around in the city, a lot of Ninjago figures. Lego has done a really great job with their Ninjago figure line, and they incorporate really well into the city. So it was really awesome, again, just to sort of go through my bin of unsorted minifigs and like, man, that really looks kind of neat. These legs look great. Here it is. So a lot of them I have no idea where they came from. They came from my mixed box of minifig parts, and Peter did a great job too, just digging around in his parts bin. So we have Star Wars, Ninjago, city, space, basically anything you can think of. We've put those minifig parts into the build. So it was super fun.
Yeah, this whole layout is just fantastic. I love the Cyberpunk theme and the unique things you can do with it, so I'm glad you guys are helping bring it back a bit. Is this something you'd like to encourage other people to get into and maybe do more of in the future?
Yeah, we sure would. So we designed the cubes to be a modular system, and this was sort of the first go of it, and we feel as though it was really, really successful, and we've gotten a lot of compliments and a lot of people interested in building in this way. So you can find Magic City Lego Users Group on Facebook, and we've been discussing the project, and I think after the event we'll probably be discussing it more, and there's a few people outside of the club who are interested in contributing, and because of the modular system, it makes it really easy for anybody to contribute. So for sure, you'll definitely see an expanded Mega City in future shows.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking us through the layout here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, guys.